Yesterday was
Yep.
International Batman Day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Today is International Hobbit Day.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
So it's Hob-bat Weekend. So yeah, it was just like, of course, the natural inclination once you realize that this whole weekend was, that you got Batman Day and then Hobbit Day. It's like, well, at least that's where my mind goes, is how do we mash these two things together? And that's how you get, the Dark Knight of the Shire. The Shire needs me, Frodo. I don't know. And so I had proposed to you guys, I don't know if you both, if you saw this, Morgan, but I said, question of the night will be, how would the existence of a Batman character change the Lord of the Rings trilogy?
Ooh.
Well, there would be an original Hob-bat, and I use Hob-bat, not Batman, because the hobbits are not the race of men.
They're not the race of men.
There would be the original Hob-bat would be Bilbo Baggins, and then Hob-bat Beyond would be Frodo Baggins. And
Okay.
his Frodo's Robin would of course be Sam, or Sam would be Alfred, I think.
So I think Sam is Alfred. And
Yeah, and he of course trained with the League of Assassins under Naz Al Ghul. And he's strong-willed enough that the One Ring would never dominate him. So his mission to go straight to Mordor is a one-man mission, and he succeeds quickly.
I would do it a little bit differently. Mine would be, the story plays out, exactly the way that it does in the books. And I say the books because the Scouring of the Shire would play into this. And so they get back to the Shire, and the Shire, the Shire's fucked. It's just wrecked. And at that point is when Samwise Gamgee swears to be vengeance.
Okay, that's better than mine. Yeah.
So then it kind of like spins off from there, and he's like, just him. I don't know. He's chasing down Saruman and orcs and stuff. And
see, I think I forget which Hobbit it is. I think is it Sam's dad that like when it's someone in Hobbiton when the one Nazgul comes to the town looking for Bilbo and the ring, and the one Hobbit is like, yeah, I don't know if you fucking left, get out of here, leave me alone. Like that guy is like once the Shire gets taken over by Mayor What's His Nuts under Saruman, like that guy is like, we can't put up with this, and he's like, you know what? I met that guy in the black cloak who was just kind of a weirdo. Like I'm just gonna dress up like that and scare the mayor's goons. Because that's
So who would the Joker be in this?
well, I mean, the Mouth of Sauron, right? I mean, now that I think about it, that's basically just the same design as the Batman Who Laughs.
It is, yeah. The Batman Who Laughs does look like how the Mouth of Sauron looked in the movie. That's when I saw the Batman Who Laughs, I'm like, the Mouth of Sauron? What are you doing here?
So yeah, we got the Dark Knight of the Shire here. I'm gonna actually gonna leave the stream for you guys watching. I'm gonna be off of here. Let these guys talk about Rings of Power because I didn't get a chance to watch an episode yet. So hopefully I'll be able to do that tonight. But I don't want to be spoiled.
Don't be spoiled.
And I don't want to just be like, oh, I'm gonna try and pretend like I'm having part of the conversation when I really have no idea what's being said. So yeah, you guys enjoyed that. I'll be back in a little while after I get some dinner made. And
be merry.
Cool.
All right. Wait for Dane to disappear.
Damn, that's hot.
So where do we want to start?
I
know where I want to
don't
start.
know. Okay, you know where you want to start, so you go first.
Adar. I want to talk about my boy Adar.
All right.
Because he has done fucked up something fierce.
Yep.
He orked the fuck out of this. I'm like, there you did. You orked it, you moron. You really orked it up. He talks to Galadriel, and he's got her captive, and is like, all right, I want you to confirm for me that this fucker is Sauron, because I want to fucking beat his skull in. Here's how I beat his skull in the first time. And so she tells him, and he's like, great, now I'm going to betray you and kill a bunch of elves. Dumb motherfucker. And she explains to her, like, no, you idiot, that's his plan, you moron. He's lured you here to kill you and take your army, you dummy. And he's like, nah, that's not true. That could never happen, says a guy who should know that could happen.
Yeah. And it's a little... I find the writing around this a little too complicated, I think. Maybe it's the right word. Because it's like, okay, This is not a complaint. This is just to notice the difference between the book, the source material, and the show.
Yeah.
The show created the character of Adar, who was a cool character, and now they're trying to conform his storyline with what happens in the source material, which is where Sauron brings an army of orcs to Eregion to take the rings, and they're trying to merge those two storylines into one thing, and use like a literary fog of war effect. Like, well, Adar could have been there. We don't know for sure. It just felt a little clumsy to me, and also Galadriel in the conversation scene with him gave things away a little too easily, I thought.
I think she's so because both of them are single-mindedly focused on stopping Sauron, right?
Yeah.
But the whole show, she has never once been subtle about what she wants. She's always direct, and it really contrasts where her way to get what she wants is to work together. She's always trying to coalition build, right? Back when she was on Numenor, when she was in the Southlands with the Numenorians and the other humans, when she went to Eregion to work with Celebrimbor to make the first set of rings, to even trying to get King Gilgalad to help her figure out what's going on with their visions. She's always tried to work together, where Adar has always been, it is all on my shoulders, it is all on me.
Yeah.
And I will enforce my will on the world.
Yeah.
And I think it is ham-fisted a little bit how it plays out.
Yeah, that's a good word, a good phrase. Ham-fisted is the way it looks to me.
Yeah.
Because it's a little too. There are some points where it feels like the writers are trying to be a little too clever for their own good.
Yeah, I agree.
And for me, this was one of them. I still liked the scene. I liked this episode a lot.
Yeah.
Because I love the character interactions. I love Adar as a character.
Yeah.
But when that was going on, I was like, oh, I see what they're doing. They're trying to have it both ways with lore nerds, right?
Right.
They're trying to tell the story of Adar, but also make it so that if thousands of years later you erase Adar from history, it will look like Sauron brought an army of orcs to Eregion, so it will conform to what we see in the source material.
Right. And you still get that certain point of view where, like, Sauron told Adar as Halbrand that, like, yeah, there's a sorcerer in Eregion who might be Sauron. Let me go scout it out for you. Yeah. And so like, Sauron set that all up to cause that army of orcs to come to Eregion, but he didn't lead it. So like, there's some. They're trying to be kind of cute with it, and I don't think it 100% works. I do like the character moments, even though they are a little ham-fisted.
Yeah, because it's unclear to me exactly what Sauron's plan is, because in the source material, he influenced Celebrimbor to make the rings and then brought an army of orcs to Eregion to take the rings by force when Celebrimbor wouldn't give them up.
Right.
But now, in this version of the story, he's already there. He's in Eregion making the rings with Celebrimbor.
Right.
And apparently is, about to get what he wants. So what's the army there for? If not, maybe it's just to like erase Eregion from existence or something, like destroy the forge. Or something.
Also, what it does is you really see Sauron start to use the invasion to his advantage, because it forces all of the people in Celebrimbor's life away from him, right? All of his apprentices, all of his assistants are fleeing in terror, and Sauron has used really the most amount of like magic we have seen in this show to just fucking whammy Celebrimbor. Yeah,
that was a cool scene.
That was a really cool scene.
And the BTS, I watched the BTS on that. The transition from when the illusion ends and switches from day to night was all practical.
Shut up.
It was. They show how they did it. It's really cool.
That's awesome.
They basically just backlit him and had the person with the reflector follow him as the camera turned. They shut down the house lights, but kept him backlit, so it looked like he was in daylight. And as they turned the camera to look at the darkened part of the room, they took the backlight away. It was a really cool shot.
So cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I should watch the behind the scenes stuff for this, because I gotta imagine there's some clever shit.
There's always when I watch it on Amazon Prime, there's always at the end of the episode, if you wait a few seconds, it takes you into the like the 7 to 10 minute fan interview portion of the show where Felicia Day interviews cast members, and they show you some behind the scenes footage, and that's where I saw it. They didn't even point to it and say, look at this cool thing we did. They just showed BTS footage of that happening and talked a little bit about it with the director.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was cool. And I love Charlie Vickers as Sauron. This guy is so good. And rewatching season 1 through the lens of season 2 really highlights how good of an actor he is and how subtle his performance was and how subtle the script is working in him. Because if you go back and watch season 1 knowing that he's Sauron right from the beginning, everything makes sense. Yeah. For me, the highlight of this episode, though, was what happens in Numenor. Shit is finally happening in Numenor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Elendil is finally popping off and becoming the man who's finally stepping up and becoming the man of faith and valor that will be like, the future iconic king of Arnor and Gondor and so forth. So finally, because it's felt like a lot of the stuff this season that isn't directly about the creation of the rings has up until this point in the show been a little bit of a placeholder.
Yeah, I would say so.
And stuff is finally starting to happen. So I think they're winding up to as the story of the rings and Eregion winds down over these final 2 episodes. I think they're ramping up the next stage of the story, which will be Numenor, and the 3rd season will be focused on the fall of Numenor and how Sauron brings that about. Right.
It definitely went. It was not the way I thought they were going to go with it, because I thought that he was going to be exiled. That's what we talked about last week. I thought they were going to his daughter was going to argue that he be exiled instead of killed. I like where it went. I thought it was cool.
Yeah. I think what they're going to do is they're going to do the forced marriage thing now.
Oh yeah.
Except it won't be a forced marriage. It'll be a marriage of political convenience, because what they're going to set up, I think, is that Numenorean society is more or less evenly split between the faithful and the king's men.
Right.
So Ar-Pharazôn and Miriel will marry to unify the country, quote unquote. Right. Which won't help anything.
No.
But I think that's another one where they're trying to maneuver their storyline into conformity with the source material.
Right.
So that they can still say, oh, look, when scholars in Middle-earth look back on this time period thousands of years later, they can see that Pharazôn married his cousin Miriel.
Right.
And this led to the downfall of Numenor.
Right.
So the details can be forgotten, but the important turning points are remembered.
Right. I like that. I also got guys touching the pet rock. Why do people try I'm sorry, Pharazôn, motherfucker, this pet rock has done nothing but cause the downfall of your cousin and your uncle. What the fuck are you doing playing with this pet rock?
Yeah, in the source material, the Palantiri there were 7 of them.
Yeah.
I think there was I forget the exact number. I think it was 7 were in Numenor at this time and were brought to Middle-earth by Elendil.
Right.
When, and that's how one winds up in
Saruman.
Yeah, Saruman's possession. So in theory, there should be 6 more or 7 more. However, I think there were 7 on Numenor and there's 1 that was missing. So, but in theory, there are at least 6 other pet rocks in Numenor at the time this story is taking place. And I wonder if they're just focusing on 1 just because the rest of them they feel it would be too complicated to focus on right now. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess you only need the 1, right? I think for to advance the plot, you don't need the other ones. Yeah. At some point, we'll probably see another one. But
they were a big part of how they basically were mass communication devices for the Numenorians who went on to found Arnor and Gondor and Rohan and so forth. So it's interesting that they're only focusing on 1 to me.
On 1 of them, yeah.
That's what fans remember from the movies.
Right. I think so, because part of it is why are they all getting these different visions? That's not, if I remember correctly, how they work until Sauron starts fucking with them, which is why.
I think that what Pharazôn saw at the end of this episode, he got a flash of Halbrand.
Yeah.
I think we're supposed to read that as Sauron already has a Palantir of his own.
Oh, that would make sense.
and he is already manipulating events in Numenor.
Yeah, that would make sense. But yeah, just anytime a fantasy show has a gem or a crystal that like is a plot device, I call it a pet rock.
Yeah.
Because it's a pet rock. They touch it, they talk to it, they say nice things to it, it gets them in trouble. It's a pet rock.
Yeah, that's valid. Just like Isildur is a horse girl.
He is a horse girl. From a long line of horse girls.
And we haven't seen him.
A long line of horse girls.
Yeah, and we haven't seen him.
No.
For a few episodes.
He's been absent for a couple episodes now.
Yeah. And I was hoping that they would at least get him. At some point, I think he's going to have to return to Numenor. Maybe they'll save it for the end of the season or something, but
yeah,
I guess he doesn't have to.
Doesn't have to
for the story. But I was hoping that he would at least, by the end of the season, be back in contact, or word will have been sent to Numenor that Isildur is alive somehow. Maybe they're saving that up. But that whole storyline after the fridging of Bronwyn seems to have become just let's move these characters around until we figure out what to do.
Right.
With that.
We are keeping these characters in a motion, but that motion is a circle.
Yeah. Because I know that it's obvious that Arondir is going to be fighting in Eregion. So they'll probably give him a lot of cool action scenes.
Yeah.
But Isildur seems like, what happened? Where did he go?
Where did he go?
Yeah. And
he's an important clue we'll need for later.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is why they need more episodes, I think, because they've got such a large cast of characters. Unlike, House of the Dragon, where it's a relatively small cast.
Is it?
At least to start with. House of the Dragon is basically a palace intrigue.
Sure.
That is I've tried watching season 2 and I couldn't get through it. And a lot of people apparently have this problem. But when it started, House of the Dragon was like a limited number of locations. There's a car alarm going off. Can you hear it?
Every so often.
Okay. If it's too intrusive, let me know.
Nah, it's fine.
What was I saying?
House of the Dragon limited sets.
Yeah. House of the Dragon was like a palace intrigue set in like several interior locations, and the stakes were just who controls the throne, and they didn't require a lot of exterior shots and a lot of special effects. So they had a smaller cast of characters
to
keep track of. And so if they only have 8 episodes or 10 episodes there, that can work. But Rings of Power has like 20, I think,
main cast
primary characters. Yeah. And it can get a little unwieldy sometimes, trying to find something to do with all of them.
I think our stuff with the Stranger and the Harfoots, we got like 2 minutes of it, and it was just like Tom removing himself from the story, dropping the Stranger off at that desiccated grove. Yeah. And Nori and Nobody getting all cuddly.
Poppy and Nobody, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and so that leaves Nori with nothing to do, really. Yeah. So it's another character who's just kind of hanging out until something happens.
Right. Like, she was talking to the leader a little bit, but that was just like, what do we do? I don't fucking know. Like, they both reached the conclusion of, like, should we go somewhere because these humans kind of suck? Maybe not. Like, we live here forever. We like holes in the ground. Big fans of that.
Yeah, they're still doing world building with the Harfoot. Now there's a helicopter flying over. Do you hear the helicopter?
No, I don't.
No? Okay.
I continue to think the Harfoot portion of this story is my least favorite.
Yeah. It's the one I wish they would hurry up and get along with something, because I like all of those characters a lot, and I like the performances a lot, and I want to see them do things that I know they're capable of. Right. I think they've dragged out the Stranger storyline a little bit too long. I think that the reveal of his name should have been in this episode.
I kind of thought it was going to be, and I thought we were going to just be nonstop Siege of Eregion.
Yeah.
Which I guess, especially because, where are we going to get a break in the action going forward? Because every so often in these, especially when you're doing a two-parter of Nothing But Combat, you need somewhere to breathe. And, I feel like the Numenor story is kind of on hold while that marriage gets set up, and that's where they're going. And then the the Hobbit Stranger Story is kind of going in circles. And
Yeah.
all of our elves are convening in Orktopia for the throwdown.
Yeah, I wouldn't say the Stranger Story is going in circles. It's running in place. More is what I thought would be doing, because they set up that the Dark Wizard, whoever that is, was going to come and personally deal with the Stranger and Tom Bombadil, and that hasn't paid off yet.
No, and Tom is just like outie. He's like, all right, here's a bunch of sticks. Figure it out, kid. And then he fucks off.
I feel like we haven't seen the last of him in this season.
I hope not, because the out was kind of weak.
Yeah.
How we doing?
Dane's back. We have to shut up now. Well, I'll say in general, without spoilers, I think, since Dane is here, that one thing this episode did for me, I think, was highlight once again how much attention the writing staff is paying to the themes of Tolkien, because Elendil, his whole story is about faith.
Yeah.
About living a life of faith and a life of loyalty and honor.
We got a huge moment for that.
Yeah.
Can
I'm
I
waiting to see what the chuds say to complain about it.
I'd like to give I guess if you call it a criticism of the show.
Sure.
I feel at arm's length from the characters generally. Like, I don't feel like I have, like, even if you can tell me that and show me in the text where something is exactly how this character is supposed to be, and I will believe that. But nonetheless, I don't feel like I really connect with almost any of them. And not only that, but there's also not enough attention paid to any one character for a long enough period of time, or at least frequently enough that I'm able to kind of nurture any kind of like empathy connection.
Morgan and I were kind of saying that ourselves.
Just talking about that, because how the size of the cast and the length of the seasons, that a lot of characters are kind of walking in circles or running in place rather than like getting their plot on and getting their development on. And like I know for me, like that characters at arm's length thing is something I have always felt with Tolkien's writing. So like that's
me too. Yeah.
That's like, oh great, they hit that perfectly. These characters are weird mythological beings that I can't quite empathize with. Yeah,
it's like reading folklore rather than fiction.
Right.
Rather than literature, I should say. That's what reading Tolkien feels like to me, because the guy is not great with dialogue.
I actually started because on Audible they have the audio production, the unabridged one read by Andy Serkis for free,
which is great, by the way.
It's great. I'm like a couple hours into it, and it's great, but I'm like, God, the dialogue is as bad as I remembered.
But I will say that on the show, most of the characters I've really felt connected with are the ones who were made up for the show.
Yeah.
And we're getting...
maybe they're just like a little bit too afraid to do anything with the other characters, right? Like, other than, or not even afraid, but just like they know they have to keep them in the boundaries to a certain degree.
Yeah, like there's that mix of they have to keep them in the boundaries and we know where they end up. I think the only character for me that has served a different role than he does in the books is Elrond.
Yeah.
Because we don't get, like, he's just kind of an expository character in the books and doesn't really participate in the story, or even like with like Galadriel, where she chooses not to be a major participant in the story for reasons she explains in the course of Fellowship.
Yeah.
But like there's a big dramatic scene you get the crux of her character where Elrond is just the leader of these elves who gets the band together and supplies them and sends them on their way.
Yeah, why is he so determined right from the beginning to do that, right?
Right.
And now no.
And the one thing this episode did do is start to give motivations for the canon characters that you can hang a hook on to get invested with. Like Elendil is a good example. You know, now he thinks his son is dead. Elendil, his adopted son, was killed right in front of him. His daughter has betrayed him. He's starting to become a person now, rather than a name who appears in a history that Tolkien wrote. And that's always been my relationship to a lot of these characters in Tolkien too, is I read about them like I'm reading about the Greek gods.
Right.
Or they're mythological figures in my brain, and it's hard for me to relate to them as people.
Yeah, well, I will say
that to change.
Elendil's like the stuff with him, and I forget the other guy's name that is no longer with us after the last episode. But like that stuff was probably the closest it's come, at least this season,
Yeah.
For me to be like, okay, I'm feeling some feelings now.
That was a really good scene. Like that, like really, really well done. The character work in that was fantastic.
Yeah, Valandil was his name.
Yeah.
Pour one out for Valandil.
Yeah,
And
because Isildur's going to name a kid after him.
Yeah, he was one of my favorite of the new characters.
Mm-hmm.
I really had high hopes for that character. I was interested to see where he went, and I really like Adar as a character.
Yeah.
I really like Nori as a character, and I would like to see them start doing something important with her.
Yeah, Nori doesn't get much now.
Yeah, not so far this season. She hasn't gotten much.
She had some good stuff.
Yeah. She's had some good character moments, but in terms of like plot things, sure. I would like to see them start doing something important with her. I like the relationships between the stranger and the Harfoots a lot. But like I said, all of the human moments for me most of them, not all of them, are coming from the characters who were not from the canon, but were invented for the show. Because I didn't have any associations
with them
connected to them that I was bringing with me from lifetime of Tolkien fandom.
Right.
They're blank slate.
Hard for me to relate to Galadriel because I've always seen Galadriel in my brain as like Tolkien's version of the Virgin Mary,
right?
Basically, or a Greek goddess of some kind. And
when that was what was most interesting in the first season to me, was just kind of learning what young Galadriel was like and how brash and traumatized she was and everything, and like seeing that play out was probably the most compelling thing in the first season of.
I agree. I think
but because we're kind of past that now, and like we're not. Yeah, it's just a little. Yeah.
I think a lot of the fan outrage, that's like a lot of the Chud propaganda, the effectiveness of it is built around the reaction I was just describing of like, this character for most people isn't really a character, she's an icon,
right?
And turning her into a character in the first season and giving her flaws. She had flaws in Tolkien's work too, but people relate to her like they do to an icon, and turning her into a person with flaws that make her somewhat unlikable kind of just broke
it doesn't make any to me it seems like this is why I think that it's a disingenuous reaction nonetheless. It's not just she's different, but like if you understand that this is thousands of years prior to anything that you know of her, then why are you not able to kind of just extrapolate from there that she might have been a different kind of person back then? Elf person.
Because gods don't change. Because I think that especially when you're talking about like the high elves, because I believe she's one of the high elves, right? Because she's that old.
She's Noldor, yeah.
So like they are effectively immortal ancient beings that I think we are in Lord of the Rings kind of expected to sort of be the same forever. I think that's just an expectation from how Tolkien writes rather than something he explicitly says about the elves, because we also do see elves change their mind in Tolkien's work and develop as characters.
I think it's specifically from the fact that most people who have engaged with Tolkien's work have only read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
And the way the elves are portrayed in those stories is not told from the elven perspective. It's told from the perspective of characters who hold these beings in awe.
Right.
Whereas if you read the Silmarillion, which is basically written, it's elven from the elven point of view, where elves are just people to each other.
Right.
So they have battles, they murder each other, they have jealousy, they have all these other human flaws that we recognize, and we don't see any of that in Peter Jackson's movies, and we don't see any of that in we don't see much of it in the books. So that's just more cultural baggage people have from that experience of most of them not having read the rest of the Legendarium.
Right.
So they're adopting the Hobbit's view of elves and the Hobbit's view of Galadriel as this ethereal earth goddess figure. Whereas if you tell the story from her point of view, which is what the first season of Rings of Power did, she's just a person.
Right.
And all the elves that she knows are just dudes and girls, because they deal with each other every day.
Right. Especially when I think one of the things like with the Third Age elves is because they've been around so long, they are a lot more cagey in how they act, because they have seen how like the domino of their consequences and actions and reactions over lifespans of the other people of Middle Earth, that like it causes them to create that stereotype because they're just like, I can give you an answer, but I have to be careful about how I do it because it will change what you are doing in ways you can't understand because I'm that fucking old.
Yeah.
And so that but when they're dealing with it with each other in this age where like their civilization is a different place, they're as a people a different people, they haven't developed that cultural norm yet in the same way.
Yeah, and in the Third Age, when the Lord of the Rings takes place, most of the elves have left.
Yeah, they fucked
and
up.
gone to the west. And so the ones who are left are extremely powerful, extremely old, and extremely influential and extremely wise when compared to hobbits, or even to like Aragorn. You know, all those characters are basically children to the elves,
Right.
and the elves treat them like children, and those characters look up to them as mentors and you know, parent type figures and rulers and advisors rather than as just people you hang out with. But in the Second Age, when the show is set, again, like Dane said, thousands and thousands of years before the events of the Lord of the Rings, there's way more elves in Middle-earth. And so people are going to be used to dealing with them differently and seeing them as complex and flawed characters. People within the universe, I mean, not necessarily in the audience.
Right. And even then, like, and the show does a little bit of touching on this, but like the difference between the men of Middle Earth and the men of Numenor is even different because Numenorians live a lot longer.
Yeah, they haven't really touched on
a higher edge. Like they, there's a little tension we get between the two when they first start interacting towards the end of season 1, but they don't really go in depth on it. But like there is a difference there between the two in terms of culture and outlook.
Yeah. Yeah, in the books, the Numenorians are like 8 feet tall, and they all live like 300 years or something.
Right.
And that they haven't brought that into the show, and I don't think they should.
I don't think so either.
You know, at least at this point, if they had started with it, that would be fine, but not now.
Because even like when we get to the Third Age, like Aragorn is, I think, over 100 years old when we meet him, or nearly 100 years old. He's in his 90s. I forget which. He is old.
Yeah.
And according to the elves, that is a child. And they talk to him as such.
Well, I could be wrong, but I think that elves, if they are not killed,
will just
basically live forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. They never die.
Well, they will fade, which is
they will fade.
They will go to the west, but they will not die until that happens.
Yeah, but book spoilers and potential show spoilers too. That's why the Numenorians end up hating them, because they're as long-lived as the Numenorians are, they're still not immortal.
Right. And they can't go to the Undying Lands. They can see them. They know where they are, but they can't go there.
Yeah. And so that's part of the underlying resentment the Numenorians feel for the elves in season 1.
Right.
That was kind of hinted at, like in the "they took our jarbs" speech.
Right.
But I don't think it was really explicitly it wasn't made clear, I think, to the audience that that's what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, like why are they otherizing?
Farazan gives a speech like, every night I can see the lighthouse and it's taunting me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I see the lighthouse of being tired of shit.
All right. Well, it's a little late. I mean, it's what, 9:30 where you guys are?
Yeah.
It's creeping up on midnight here, so.
I've got